So, Alex, what is your first memory in life?
My first memory is my holidays in my grandparents' farm in a village where every Sunday my grandfather would play the violin. He was a teacher.
And what sort of music did he play?
Basically, he played popular music, that was the folk music from the region where we were living. Also, a light sort of serenades, like Toselli serenades, and popular things, and also from operettas songs that he could put on a violin. And I always was fascinated by the movement of the bow and the violin. And I went home asking my mother for something to do with music, and she bought me a little piano accordion, very little one. I was probably 5, I remember that. And the day that this piano accordion arrived, I still remember that the whole day I went to the back garden in a little town called Todicescu, where I was born, and I didn't want any food, I didn't want anything, just trying to make songs that I heard from my grandfather or from my mother on that little piano accordion. Well, my mother then said, oh, maybe you learn the piano. But unfortunately, the piano teacher in our little town wasn't a very nice lady. So after 1 or 2 lessons, I said to my mother, I don't want to have piano lessons, she's nasty to me. And so my mother said, okay. Then a bit later, when I was 7 or 8, she was searching other schools or somewhere that I can learn something, because she saw that I can play songs by ear, but I wasn't trained properly. So my auntie, my mother's sister, younger sister, said, well, there's a music school in a town called Baco, just new for talented students, talented young kids. Why don't I ask Sandu, was my name called by my family, to go and try to audition for that. Well, by that time I was nearly 10. So I went to the music school with my mother, which was about 120 kilometers from my little town, and another town. And I played my piano accordion, and I sang, and the director of that school came to me after the audition and said, we accept you in that school, but I am a piano accordion player, I am the director of the school, and I must tell you, this is not a good future for a musician. Violin will be better for you. So why don't you come here at school and learn the violin? I said, but I don't know anybody who can teach me violin. Don't worry, we have a good teacher. Leon Bongard is here, we'll take care of you. And as it happened, he had his violin with him, and he put his violin, he played the Schubert, the B, and I was so impressed. I said, yes, you can teach me. So how I started my journey as a violin student at school. However, there was very difficult time because there was not much food, we didn't have money. In the meantime, my father was very sick, and I was also very lucky that I could play the piano accordion still, because the director who was at school there said, look, there is a play going downhill in the same in the theater in the same town, and they have a play that needs a piano accordion player to play in the back, behind
Backstage.
backstage, because there is a couple of scenes that the hero has to go and fake that he plays the piano accordion. So why don't you play? Look, this is a song, I teach you. So every week I probably went once or twice. I was probably 11 and played, and I got money for it already. So when my mother came and visited me, that was in the winter of that year, 1952, I had a coat and gloves, and she said, "Where do you have those from?" I said, "I bought it myself because I made money with my piano accordion." Okay, now later, in the same year, my father died, and I had to move to another city called Iași, a bigger city, where I continued to play the violin in school and study very much study with a very good teacher there. But again, my mother and sister, who were living together, didn't have any means to have much food, and so I again took advantage of my piano accordion playing, because that was much easier. I didn't want to spoil my violin playing to do weddings and all sorts of gigs, yeah. So I was about 14, 15. I had a little band there that with the agreement of the music school, I could go on weekends and play for weddings. And there was in the band we had an older person that played the saxophone. One of my other colleagues, who was a gypsy descent, he could play violin, gypsy, very good gypsy, he was there. I was piano accordion in that, and I had a double bass player that came with us, one of those big, that I don't think he had all strings, he had two or three strings, but he had something else in double bass player. He had a door in the back of the double bass. Why? Weddings in that time in Romania, they were very long. They would start on Sunday morning and play in the Sunday afternoon, even Sunday night when everybody was at the table, was still playing. Even Monday morning, people would come for the saying goodbye and having the meal for morning, and we're still playing. So the wedding will go until about Monday lunchtime. And people will give us not only money in the violin or on the head, but they will come with gifts. They will come with a roasted chicken or with a bottle of wine and a piece of ham. And so we couldn't eat all this immediately. So the double bass player had a door in the back, and he will store there everything until the wedding was. And then we had a train or a cart going back to where we were living, and the double bass player would open the door and say, "Here a piece of ham for you, here a bottle of wine for you, here's a chicken for you." So I got home not only with money but with something to eat as well.
How extraordinary.
So that was in my teenagers until I arrived to the Conservatory in Bucharest, where I became a student of violin there. And the luck that I had probably one of the, if not the best violin teacher in that time that was guiding me, and I forgot about piano accordion then because I was starting teaching violin now, young, because my teacher will give me students to teach to help me financially. Many things happened in that time at the Conservatorium, and that was between I was 18 and 23. That was the time of the university study. That one of the funny things happened that we had to perform many times in different productions. But I remember one time I was starting to learn the concerto by Khachaturian. And it happened that Khachaturian at some point came and gave some master classes in there, and I was chosen to play, and I worked with him, telling me how he actually wanted to be played his concerto, and I was very fortunate. And in the end, there is a picture over there that is a concert there, and I had to perform, and in front of the colleagues, conservatorium, audience, and the staff and Khachaturian, and I wasn't. I was so nervous to go on stage to play that. I was prepared, but on stage, my teacher, very strong Armenian guy called Avakian, was backstage with me, and suddenly, when he saw that I'm just nervous and
White with nerves.
white on my face, he said, "You must perform," and he pinched my bottom very hard. And I had a pain that I never had such a pain in my life. And I said, "What is doing that?" And he pushed me on stage, and I went on stage angry. And suddenly, orchestra that has only 2 bars introduction, I started. I forgot about anybody there in the hall, and I played the concerto in front.
That is a story the world needs to know.
I played the concerto in front of the audience there without thinking. And of course, when I finished the study in Bucharest, I loved chamber music. And in chamber music, I tried to play quartets with various colleagues, and there was always a problem to find a good violist. There were good colleagues playing violins, cello, and so, but viola wasn't at that time a very, very popular instrument. And to be honest, many of my colleagues that couldn't play well violin, go to the viola because there's a place there for you, maybe in the orchestra or somewhere. So one night, I remember having in my quartet at that time, where I was playing violin, a concert in a little town. He played the cello concerto he played the Dvorak, and I played a concerto by Mozart, violin concerto. We shared the same program. And the night coming back from that town to Bucharest, we were sitting on a train for about 8 hours, not sleeping couchettes, just sitting and talking and drinking a little bit of wine, and said, "Our quartet is not going because we can't find a very good viola." And I said, "Why don't I try to play the viola and the quartet? Maybe that will be a solution for that Romanian called Philharmonia quartet." So the next day I went to my teacher, the same teacher. I said, "Do you have an instrument that I can borrow?" I said, "Of course, I have many instruments. I have a collection of instruments. I want to try to play the viola. I don't give up the violin, but for the quartet, maybe it's a better chance." And he lent me an instrument, very generous. It happened that the quartet was engaged to do a concert in 3 weeks, a month time from that particular day, and I even remember the program, and I have a picture of that concert on my wall in my study. That there was a Beethoven, a late Beethoven. There was, of course, Haydn to start, the Haydn. There was a Debussy and a late Beethoven. So I had 3 weeks to learn the parts. I knew the music for Beethoven and Debussy and Haydn as a violinist, but I never was playing as a violist. So in 3 weeks' time, I had to redo all my thinking and we played the concert. And that was our baptized date of the very good quartet in Romania. That quartet was invited with a scholarship to study with Amadeus Quartet in Holland. and that was in 1968, few years later. And we arrived in Holland, and the Amadeus Quartet was so friendly, so nice. They were like parents to us, guiding all of them, and they liked us very much because we were very humble from Romania. We played well, but they said, boys, you must study more here in the West because you are talented, but you don't have experience as much as you need to have connections with us. So, of course, we asked for permission for the Romanian communist government for extension, for 2 years extension to study, because they gave us a scholarship to study there. And of course, the Romanian government refused the extension. We had to go back. But the cellist of the quartet, Romanian quartet, Stefan Metz, and myself decided not to return to Romania and to stay in Holland to study and to find work. And of course, immediately we found the orchestra there to play. Unfortunately, the other two had to return to Romania because they had families in Romania. We were single, so we could. Now, it happened that the Dutch radio had advertised lots of positions in that time, and I'm talking now. In 1969 happened that I had a position with the Delft Orchestra as a principal viola. But in 1970, the Dutch had auditions, and I auditioned for violin, and I auditioned for viola. And the orchestral director or the manager came to me and spoke, and I could speak Dutch by that time, that they can offer me a violin position if I wish, a reconfire position, or a principal viola position on the Dutch radio. So what would you like to do? I said, well, of course, principal viola is the one that I would like to contribute to the orchestra. Now, I've always tried, even that playing in that fabulous orchestra, still to do chamber music all the time. And I played either trios as a violin with colleagues, or playing viola with other colleagues in chamber music, and trying to reform my quartet. At the meantime, the second violinist of the Romanian quartet escaped from Romania. I helped him to escape and came to Holland too. So now we were three from the quartet. The older member, who was one of the concertmaster of the Romanian orchestra, didn't want to come. He was much older generation, and he said no. So we were looking for a first violin for the quartet. And as it happened, you meet a lot of people in music life and the music world. And we met a very good violinist that was working in Holland in a place called Tilburg. And that violinist was Harry Kirby. Harry Kirby, Australian violinist, was working with a quartet, a Dutch quartet, for about 6 years or 5-6 years in Holland. And when we met him, he was very willing to try to play with us. And we played together, and it was a very good match. And he said, but unfortunately I decided not to stay in Holland anymore. I want to go back with my family to Australia. If you're interested, you can come and to see if you like to move to Australia to have a quartet. So, that being the case, I came to visit Australia in 1974, living in Killara with Harry Kirby family, and the second violin of the quartet came with me, but the cellist, a Romanian cellist, said, no, I can't go to Australia, I have a family here in Holland, only if they give me a contract with such a permanent position, I might consider coming to Australia. Well, that was difficult because here was Harry Kirby, Dorel, me, and suddenly Nathan Wax came on the circuit here, recommended by John Painter as a young, promising, very good cellist, and we tried to play. We gave a concert here. We played the Quartet Number 6 by Sculthorpe, and we played some Beethoven and some Haydn, and there was immediately a very good connection between these four people that we tried. Of course, Dorel and I returned to Holland because there was only a short holiday here, to receive an invitation a few months later from the Conservatory that they would like us to come to Australia, to migrate and to become teachers at the Sydney Conservatorium and to reform the Sydney String Quartet. Now, there was a very short time because they wanted to be here by the end of February, when the Conservatory will start in February. In Holland, at that time, I had, of course, as a principal viola, a lot of commitments with the orchestra solos. And again, there's always a luck in life. The director of music in the Dutch orchestra, when I mentioned that I would like to go to Australia to continue my quartet, my love of my life to play ensemble, not that I don't like here in the orchestra, but I would like to try something else. He said, well, I would let you go if you find a replacement for the whole rest of the season, because the season in Holland will finish in the end of June, and I would ask the permission to go before end of February. If you find a replacement. And it happened that in some gigs that I did in Holland, I met a musician, a very good conductor called David Zeman. And he was married to a viola player called Mary Ingham, who, believe it or not, was Australian. So I went to their house and I spoke with Mary and David. I said, look, Sydney Conservatorium is asking me to go and start to work in Australia, but I can't leave because I have the contract with Dutch Radio. Would be willing to help me to take my place until the end of the season? And very generous Mary said, yes, I'm Australian. Because of that, I'm going to do your job. So
extraordinary.
Extraordinary, yes.
Yes.
So I went to the director and the Dutch Radio, and they said, look, we have a very good viola player who is willing to take my position until the end of the season, until you find a replacement for me. And that was how I actually been able to come to Australia earlier than my contract would have allowed me to. Well, that's so far my life to 1975.
And when you came to Australia, when you actually moved here, was it easy? Was it straightforward, or was it difficult to settle into a life on the other side of the world?
Well, for a start, because I didn't speak very much English at that time, I was very interested with my students to communicate, and the music was, of course, the easy communication, but fortunately I had some students that spoke Dutch and some students that could speak French, and so different languages helped me to start. And as a funny thing, I have to mention that the quartet at that time with Harry Kirby, Doreen Tirku, Alex Todicescu, and Nathan Wax rehearsed every day, but we spoke 4 languages in the quartet. Harry and me and Dorel spoke Dutch together, because Harry learned Dutch and with Dorel and I as well. I spoke Romanian with the second one in the same rehearsal, but I spoke French with Nathan, with the cellist. And Nathan and Harry, they spoke English together, and Dorel with Nathan spoke German. So the rehearsals were in those languages every time. So we had to translate sometimes from each other what we were saying. But of course, music is always the easy way to communicate. You just pick up your violin and you play, or viola or cello, and say, that's the way I would like the phrase to sound. So that was the quartet live in the beginning. And believe it or not, every time I saw Nathan in those years, we still speak French together as a fun, you know, as kept like that.
Yes.
And as you asked me about the beginning, being very, very busy with, immediately I arrived in Australia on the 28th of February 1975, and the 1st of March I started to give lessons at the Conservatory. And we lived in Leichhardt in a rented little duplex there, or what we call a half house, and Dorel and his family with wife and daughter and myself. And I remember going by bus in every day to Conservatorium and so, and it was also easy because a lot of people in Leichhardt speak Italian, and I could speak a bit of Italian, so shops and so was easy. But then I wanted to move to the North Shore, and I moved for a couple of years in Mosman until I found this place in Tarahumara where I'm living now for 44 years.
And tell me, with your students that you taught, how did they compare to the students that you might have taught in Holland? Were they of the same standard, or did you find at that point that they weren't so advanced?
Well, music is a universal language, so you can very quickly find out what the level is in the and I must say that the music in Australia was very the same like music in Holland in the student years that I remember. In other words, they were very interested to learn. There were some very talented children, as you know, that they became professional musicians all around the world, Australians. So I wouldn't say there were less than any European students that I taught either in Romania or in Holland.
And tell me, with instruments, were there quality instruments around for students to learn on in Australia in the 70s? Was that an issue or not really?
Well, the instruments, it's always a problem to find the appropriate instrument, but somehow people managed to find instruments because a lot of instruments were imported from other Europe or from United States here, and some dealers that brought some good instruments. I was searching always when I was on tour to see if there's any instrument available and to send it to Australia to have, and few instruments came, and of course later there were sponsors that will buy good instruments for talented students. But a gifted student can make a sound on everything actually.
Yes.
It's a gift that you adapt to everything, because before I found my very great instrument that I still have, I bought it in Holland in 1972, and that's another story. I played on not so famous instruments, and I still could make a sound that the people could appreciate. So it's something that you can do if you have the soul and you have the talent. You can, it comes out on whenever you play. I remember that one day I had to play somewhere, and I had an instrument that hardly could be tuned, and I still struggled to make as best as possible my sound.
Now, you've been teaching for a long time, and how has your teaching evolved over the years? Is it similar to what it was back in the 1970s, or is your sort of slant on things changed?
Well, teaching is a continuing process. I think that if you're interested to be a good teacher, which I've been always, that means you never stop learning. Because not only that you know a lot of things that you can apply, but you learn new things, because every student is an individual and has characteristics and has sides that you can learn from. And I was always open to that sort of situation when I can even learn from students, not only teach them. And I can give you an example. There, for instance, I will have 2 or 3 students playing the same piece, a concerto or a sonata, and there will be a different interpretation. And I wouldn't try to change much if somebody came with idea that worked very well and became very attractive by playing that way. I will say, oh, keep it that way, and I will say, oh, that's another way of playing that piece. So that was an open process. You didn't close and say, I know to be played only that way, and everybody should be in that box, and you play that way, with finger-wise, expression, everything. No, music is so incredible, varied. So that's why, fortunately, it never dies, because it's so different.
That's right.
The same concerto, you can hear it a 1,000 times and it will be different.
That's absolutely true.
Yeah.
And you just mentioned your instrument, and I know how beautiful it is because we played together, and you played on the. Just to finish off with, tell us about your tell us about your viola.
Well, of course, when the Dutch radio appoint principal players, like concertmasters and principal viola, principal of second violin, principal cello, they expect to be playing solos all the time, because that's the music written. They have always solos to come out in the orchestral texture. Especially that we did also operas with the orchestra, and very often they have not only solos for the violin, first violin, but they have solos for violas, they have solos for cello. So they encourage people to have good instruments, to be able to project the sound and to be able to make a good easy, attractive sound. So in my first years with the Dutch radio was always a little shortcoming that my instrument wasn't as good as the concertmaster instrument or the cellos. So one day somebody suggested to try a instrument that was available maybe, because a principal viola previous many years before me had that instrument, but he died, and his family is keeping that in a bank, and maybe it will be able to sell it. They will be allowed me to buy it, but I said, but I don't have any money. I had good salary here, but I was in the process of buying a house there. He said, don't worry, we haven't found that the instrumental found, that the orchestra have, and we give the money to the players that they need, and it's only 1% interest for that to keep the paperwork. So I met that family where the instrument was brought, and I tried, and I fell in love with the instrument, a very good instrument, which was quite expensive. And of course, the lady who had the instrument said, no, probably I don't want to sell it. But fortunately, I became friends with her son and her daughter, and they came to me on a Sunday. They said, Mom, I need money for a new washing machine. That one, I need the guttering so when I came with a bag of money from the Dutch radio, and I brought cash with me and put it on the table, the instrument was released and I could have it, and I still have it there, that 1972.
1972, but the all-important thing is, when was that instrument made? And who was it made for?
Yeah, the instrument supposed to be made in 1730 by David Tekla in Rome, in Italy, and has a special sort of head with an angel, and so that instrument served me in all these concerts at Holland, in Australia, and we calculated with the quartet in about 35 countries that the quartet performed in the time of the Sydney String Quartet. About 35 countries. We did over 1,000 concerts with the Sydney String Quartet, with very funny stories. One day, maybe I'll tell you some of them too.
That's for our next session, I think. Yes, Alex, it's been an absolute pleasure to hear about your career, wonderful career, and I think we'll have to do another session later. Thank you so much.